unmute myself. Okay, I think we're good now. Well, welcome back. Welcome back to the second hour here, and we're going to talk a little bit about seating position and the stroke too, so pitching mechanics. And I know there were some questions that got pushed through when we were working out, and so I'll try to get to those as well. And then, but two, please, I encourage, as I'm walking through the presentation, just go ahead and shoot your questions my way, and I think I should be able to see those. And we'll just have a conversation too. So you don't necessarily have to wait till the end to ask questions, and interrupt me as needed. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then hopefully everybody can see that okay. And Matt will tell me if I can't. So so we're going to talk about seating position and pushing, as I said. So and we'll start out with a little bit of time on seating position. And so when we're looking at our goals of positioning an athlete in a racing chair, the reference point that we're going to work from is trying to optimize the contact angle. So that just means we want to ensure that they're achieving optimal access to the hand ring. And generally what I'm looking for is from 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock on the hand ring. And I'm going to get my spotlight. So maybe, here we go. And so we just look at this, and this is a mirror image of a clock face. So making contact about 2 o'clock, and then we want to try to get some good coverage to about 7 o'clock here. So moving across the hand ring in this range. So that's the goal. So from that, we know what the end goal is going to be, and then we're going to work back from that and try our best with the qualifying. And I'm a man of qualifiers in that it's going to be dictated by body length, arm length. It's going to be dictated by functional ability too, so classification, and other variables too that make our sport unique. And so you work around those realities, and with the end goal of always trying to maximize this contact angle here. And also with that, we want to also combine that with ensuring that the athlete is anchored and has a nice foundation, so they're safe, they're secured in the cage, but also allows them to apply force effectively. So any type of excessive movement is going to be detrimental to their efficiency. So we want to, as best we can, we want to connect the athlete to the frame in a way that's both safe and provides optimal stability. So generally, when we want to try to get the athlete to sit as high as possible, but we're also ensuring that they have optimal balance and stability. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to get out of this, and then we all good, yeah. And so if you look at, this is Tatiana, the cutout Tatiana in the racing chair, and I'm just going to manipulate her a little bit and just show you what some different adjustments are. So one of them is the axle position, which really is just looking at shoulder position relative to the axle, and those are my keys. That's what I'm keying off of. I'm looking at the middle of the shoulder, and then I'm comparing that to where the axle is. And then from that, I'm going to work back into arm length and where that hand is referenced to the hand ring. So we can go axle position, which just means we're going to move, if we can adjust the axle position and move the shoulders forward, right? So then you can see what that shoulder is doing relative to the axle, right? You can see what's happening relative the hand to the hand ring, right? So then if we move the athlete back, right? So actually shorten that distance between where the axle and the rear of the cage is, then the athlete's going to drop deeper into the ring, right? So we want to achieve the right balance where they're not too far out in front of the ring, because then you lose the ability to effectively apply force. But we also don't want them too deep in the ring, because that's gonna unload that front end, and some of those efficiencies are going to be lost with the front of the chair moving up rather than forward. And also the way that the elbow moves and during extension across the ring here. So we don't want to do that. So it's just the right balance. So you want to be far enough forward that you can still access that 7 o'clock ring effectively, but not too far forward that you're losing touch with that in a meaningful way. Seat height is the other adjustment we can make, so we can go up and down, and that can be your butt or your knees. So you can see if we're just doing both the knees and the butt, and we're moving the athlete up, you can see what that does. It's going to pull them up and away from the bottom of the ring. If we do just the butt, and this isn't perfect, obviously it's going to be a little bit different in real life. It's just to give you an idea. But if we just do the butt, then you can see we're going to drop the athlete down closer to the back of the ring, but we're also going to move that shoulder back a little bit too, relative to where it sits here within the hand ring. If we then drop the knees and raise the butt, you can see what that does to the shoulder and the way then that system shifts forward, and perhaps moving the athlete into a better position to make contact with the ring here. But again, that's going to be a matter of functional capacity too. So generally, if you don't have the ability to engage your core, then a flatter position is not going to be that effective for you. So so that then is the last one. So here's me just playing around with the knee height a little bit, right? So I can drop that, and then the butt comes up, so we can drop that down here too. So so that's just some few keys, adjustments that can be made to get the athlete, again, with the idea that we want to get them in that position so they can optimize their contact with the hand ring. Let me get back in my slideshow here. Okay, so this maybe is a little bit covered, but just some general rules of thumb when you're seating an athlete. An athlete with more functional capacity, they tend to sit with a higher seat and a lower knee height, so they just sit a little bit flatter. So you can't see that. Here's a couple T54s. This is Gude Kim, Aaron Pike, and you can see their hip here is just off the fender here. So they sit pretty high and their knees are pretty flat. So I've just tried to show you with some reference lines of the back angle here and here. So very, relatively flat where the shoulder's positioned as compared to the wheel. But athletes that have a shorter arms and torso, they may tend to sit a little bit further back in the frame to access the bottom of the ring, and in a lower seat height too. That just gets them down so they can access that bottom. And that's really what we're looking at. But a few different functional classifications here. So I have a few different T53s. This is Peter Park, who trained here and was an assistant coach for us for a while. Who's a classic 53 spinal cord injury. So he sits with his knees up a little bit higher, and which then brings his shoulder position back a little bit. So you can see that as compared to GD or Aaron, although Aaron is tall. So he's relative to the wheel, we're going to pull his shoulder position out further forward a little bit. Ian is a T53, who is a little bit shorter in terms of body segments. So in order for her to access the bottom of the ring, we're going to move her down a little bit and pull that shoulder back. She also sits with a little higher knee height because of functional ability. A couple other 53s with full fusions. So they have no flexion, extension, rotation, right? So that's a reality that you work around. So they're not able to arch over and access the back of the ring. So we just have to position them a little bit differently. So this is Josh and how he's selected his seating position, which best allows him to apply force. And oops, Amanda as well. I don't know why that popped up. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. But same thing. So you can see just the way knee height and butt height, then it affects and influences where that shoulder is positioned. And I have had conversations with people asking, well, what's the optimal position of the shoulder relative to the hand ring or the wheel? And there really isn't. That's 1 degree removed from what you really should be looking at, and that is having access to the back of the ring, given that you have the appropriately sized hand ring, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I don't key off of that relative to hand ring or wheel necessarily, only as a secondary point of reference from ensuring that they have access to this part of the hand ring. Then we have some quadriplegics on the bottom, and here's Ray Martin, who has full core function, so he can sit a little bit differently than a classic quadriplegic with an SCI. So you can see, it's a little bit hard, but you can see the difference. The knees for Ray are positioned down a little bit relative to a different 52. But again, with the idea of optimizing that contact angle. And then a couple examples also I give. This is Mia, who was one of my great athletes in the early days of my coaching career. And there was some different ranges of motion that we worked around just to ensure that she could still contact the hand ring. And so we just decided that she was best served on a larger hand ring size, positioned back with the knowledge that we weren't going to be able to access the bottom of the ring, but we could really maximize and make effective that contact early on the ring from 1 o'clock down to 3:30, 4 o'clock, and leverage that as best we could. And she did incredibly well with that setup. So I think that the point is you have your ideal, and you work back from that and with an understanding of how does this best leverage what the reality of each athlete brings to the table. And then finally, this is another 53 with fusion, Brent Lakatos. He's a world record holder in the 1500 and T53. So you can see his strategy when he's positioning himself is to drop down very deep in the frame, but then pull that front shoulder out in front of the wheel, which is typically what you'll do. I have a couple athletes who with a similar functional ability, and we've used the same strategy, and it's can be very effective. But there generally has to be the drop of the seat down has to be accompanied by a positioning a little bit further forward in order to still make optimal contact with the hand ring. And that's what Brent has done very well. So that's a quick run through. So if you have questions, send my way. So again, these are just general rules of thumb to work off of, and then you have to be creative. And with the maximum of optimize the contact angle and trying to allow the athlete to apply force most effectively, just to get that chair moving forward. That's the key. Okay, my next slide. So talking about hand ring measurement and figuring out what is your optimal size, because that has a lot to do with how you position the athlete in the frame. And the guide that we use is a knuckle to elbow measurement, and we've been using that for about 8 years, and we were doing a research study doing different segment measurements and projecting that onto how the athlete sat in the frame and hand ring size, wheel size, and this was a number that kept recurring, and we saw there was a trend that there was a correlation and a causality between this measurement from here to here and optimal hand ring diameter. So basically all we're doing is measuring from this knuckle right up to the top of where that elbow hinges. So oftentimes I'll put my finger in here with the athletes, and I'll just have them flex their arm up and down, and I'll find the head there of the bone, and then you'll take that measurement, and you can match that directly to your hand ring diameter. So if you have a measurement of 14.5 inches, then you would fall on a 14.5 inch hand ring, and then I'll usually round down. So if they're just over 14.5, I'll probably drop them to 14.5, right? Because obviously not everybody's going to be exactly on target, but it is a good reference point, and I'm really confident that there's value to using this measurement, and we've validated across a lot of different athletes, even those who have moved up and down in ring size with the idea of, okay, on a hilly course, I'm going to try to run a 17-inch hand ring, and on a flat course, I'm just going to run a 15, and then maybe on the track, I'm going to go down to 13.5, with the idea that we're going to try to correlate that to bicycling gear ratios. And I can tell you that at the end of the day, having that ratio nearly a 1-to-1 is nearly always the most effective in the long run. There may be points where a smaller hand ring size may allow you to achieve a slightly higher velocity, but typically it all washes out in the end because of the variation, wind speed, climbing, and so on. That this seems to be a pretty good variable. Okay, I gotta go. I'm way behind on so we're gonna get into biomechanics. Okay, so we're going to go through a few of the different phases of the stroke, and we'll start with where you make contact with the ring, which is the loading, which I call you're loading the hand ring into the hand. So that's just initial contact and hand load. And a few things that we're going to look at is how is that hand positioned, and also how are you interfacing the glove with the hand ring. So the hand position, you want to see that thumb flexed up toward the sky, and you can see with these athletes here, you can see these different angles that are occurring here and here, and you can see that athlete has that thumb pointed up toward the sky. And one of the cues that I use when I'm teaching that to the athletes is to think about actually coming up and under into the hand ring, almost like you're scooping up into it. And they don't do that, right? I mean, that's not at all what happens in reality, but it's just it's a verbal cue that then tends to force the athlete to kind of think about catching and getting that thumb up so that they can optimize purchase on the hand ring. And you can see down in this photo too, the same idea of the thumb being flexed up toward the side. So you can see that wrist is in extension here, and radial deviation. So hand-to-hand ring interface. So that's just how the glove is interfacing with the hand ring. Where do you make contact with the ring? And as you can see here, with the style of glove that we're most predominantly using, which is a finger thumb style, with a flat glove style or a harness glove style, it's going to be a little bit different. But with this style that most of the athletes use, you're going to make contact between the thumb and the first finger. So you can see here, and what that allows you to do is to dig that ring into that point of contact. And really get a good toehold on that ring from which you can then subsequently apply force. And you can see the thumb is contacting the ring on the top, the outer part of it, and then those fingers are making contact on the inner outer part of the ring, right? So it really gives you good purchase. It also takes some stress off the forearms. With a flat glove, certainly a flat solid glove, you tend to have to squeeze in a little bit more and use those wrist flexors to create the appropriate adhesion and purchase with the ring. And with this particular style of glove, you tend to offload some of that stress, and just the natural groove that's created by the glove allows you to gain a good toehold. Point of contact in the ring is we like to see it at about 2 o'clock. That is dictated by the velocity that you're moving. So if you're moving faster, that gets progressively later. If you're moving a little bit slower, that gets progressively earlier. Same with release and finishing the drive phase. But about, I say 1 to 2 o'clock is where you're going to make contact on the ring. And the key to this part of the stroke is just to make good contact. So if you miss a stroke and you're not optimizing that purchase, really you can't, you're undercutting the entirety of the stroke, and force application is going to be compromised, and oftentimes you'll skip off and slip, and then you can get burns on your arms, which is no fun. So that's your first point of contact with the ring. Then we're going to move into actually the drive part of the stroke, and this is where you're actively applying force to the wheel and moving the chair forward. So some keys that I look for, and when I'm doing video analysis or looking at the athletes, is to try to achieve this it's called flexion extension profile, and what we're looking at is flexion here at the elbow, so you can see that angle, and then I want extension at the wrist, right? So it's this right here, this flexion and extension. Same with this back shot of Amanda, where you have a nice angle here at the elbow, and that's that correlative angle here at the wrist, and what that tells me is that you've gotten into a really strong position, and you're engaging the appropriate muscular systems to apply force most effectively. And I call it the power position. It's almost like if you're in the gym doing dumbbell presses, kind of a fly press, where you get in this movement where you're driving through the base of the hand here and applying force. And just really situated in an optimal way. And so if when you're slowing athletes down or looking at them, you want to see these angles, and generally you'll start to get this come through at about 3 o'clock, all the way through almost to the point where they're releasing the ring. You can see it with these shots. GD is here. He's at about 6 o'clock, so he's right about ready to move into the final phase of the stroke. And Amanda is too. She's probably a little bit earlier, about 4 o'clock, but you can see those angles are still being achieved. The other thing to look for is this shoulders to spine profile, and we want to be as balanced as possible. But again, with qualifier, that's going to vary based on with some athletes and just the reality of their disability. And so, but we're going to work from something like this, and that just allows you a nice symmetrical foundation to work from as you're applying force with the arms. And that way you can best apply force symmetrically, right? So you want to apply force evenly so that you're not pushing the chair with more force toward the right or to the left, and that's the goal. That's the goal. I will say with the caveat that I have not seen anyone who's symmetrical. A few athletes that are close to that, but so I think that you work toward that, but also with the understanding that a lot of those, as you gain and progress, a lot of those asymmetries will be absorbed, and some of those inefficiencies will be dissolved, and they may always be there, but the athletes learn to work around those inefficiencies so that they really don't negate their performance. Okay, so that's for a second part of the drive that I want to talk about is what the hand's doing and the pinky. So the pinky squeeze, and you can see from 1 o'clock to 3:30 to 6 o'clock, that as the athlete moves from this contact, so the loading of the hand and the hand ring, down into about 3:30, 4 o'clock, all the way down to 6 o'clock, that as they move through, that pinky is rotating in toward the wheel. And that, again, indicates that they're engaging the appropriate muscle systems and applying optimal amount of force. And puts them back in that power position like that I just showed and just talked about, where you're driving, pushing through the bottom of the wheel, and really leveraging that force. So that's what you want to look for. So you can see here the hands positioned this way on contact, and then gradually moving in to the next phase, which is your release. And so and when I say release, I talk about throwing the hand ring. So that's one point in the stroke that we really focus and key on is what are you doing upon release? So it's not just that we want to minimize the braking forces that you're applying. So it's just not that you are spinning off of the ring. Rather, we want to still get some more velocity out of this last few hours. We want to leverage what the hand can do to get some continual force application. So I talk about throwing the hand ring and pushing through the back of the hand ring rather than just to the terminal part of the stroke. We want to push through that, if that makes sense, and in a very dynamic way. So where it's moving very, very explosively from, and it's very, I mean, it's a complex dynamic system with the thumb rotates away from the hand ring. So you can see here, so the thumb's rotated away from the hand ring, the wrist is moved this way, right? So we're in wrist flexion, but then the thumb's also driving down towards the ground at the same time. So there's a lot going on an optimal release, but that really does differentiate oftentimes athletes in terms of ability and performance level. And so what this picture here is showing is the initial part of that release. So this is Aaron. So you can see his thumb started to drive down. It started to rotate away from the ring, exactly the opposite of what it was just doing. So you just had the pinky, as you went through the drive phase, the pinky was twisting in toward the wheel. Now we're twisting it away. And twist isn't the appropriate term, but it's moving away while the thumb's rotating away in the same way. And then we're getting into this position here, right? So he's just released and thrown the hand ring, and he's gotten into this position here and here. So that's I call it the late hours force application. So we want to get those last 2 to 3 hours where we're just not spinning the ring. We want to apply force. We want to get something out of that, because there's a lot to be said and a lot to be gained from those last few hours of contact. So that's the cue I use is drive through the back of the hand ring. Don't think about just spinning off, but really drive through it. Get some more meat into it. Get some more meat into it. Okay, I guess I have 5 Q&As. Well, let me finish this and we'll get to that. Okay, so the next part is what we call the recovery phase of the stroke, and that's where the athletes are off the hand ring, and where the chair's moving based on the work that was just done during the drive phase. And I call this separate and accelerate phase. We want to open up the chest, we want to engage the stretch reflex, and then accelerate back in so we can set ourselves up for some nice initial contact and hand load, and then back into the drive phase. So what I key off of, I don't look at elbow height. Rather, what I look at is what's the separation between the hand and the hand ring at initial contact, and I want to try to push as much distance between peak lift and stretch, where the highest point of where the athlete moves away from the hand ring before they accelerate back to the ring. I want to maximize that distance and try to create as much space as I can. So that gives the athlete more distance, more time to accelerate back into contact and carry a little bit more linear hand speed back into that first point of contact. So so you can see here's a couple different classifications. So here's Daniel's a T54, and you can see really nice hand separation here. So he's going to get back on the ring and pop that thing at 21 plus miles an hour. Here's this is Heinz Fry, probably the greatest wheelchair marathoner ever to live, and still races. So Heinz, he sits a little bit differently as a T53. You can see how high his knees are. And so if we were only looking at how high the elbows were getting. Obviously, Daniel's getting a lot higher than Heinz, and that's just because of his seam position. I mean, that's just the key there. But what Heinz still is able to achieve is a nice bit of hand separation. He's just reaching back a little bit farther, and I have a video I'll show in a second here. He's getting that same hand separation. It's just not at the same height as Daniel, but he's still getting that room. He's creating distance between the hand and the hand ring, so he can accelerate back into the hand ring. And probably this is a shot I took from LA Marathon in 2001. I bet Heinz probably going 22, 23 miles an hour here. So about the same as what Daniel would hit. But you can see same idea. Separate the hands. And then talking about opening up the chest. So here's a couple shots of this is Ariel and this is Ian. So you can see at their peak lift and stretch here, peak separation, that they really have a nice open chest. The deltoids are back. But doing that without pulling the elbows together. So we want to maintain that natural flow of the hands off the hand ring back up and then back into acceleration to contact. So we want to maintain that distance with the elbow. So rather than trying to pull the elbows back and squeeze and try to get extra lift via that mechanism, don't do that. Don't do that, because what it does is it interrupts the flow of the stroke back into acceleration, back into contact. So engage that stretch, allow for that great acceleration back into the ring, but do so while maintaining the natural line of movement and momentum from the previous stroke. So that's separate, accelerate. I'll breeze through this one real quick. So this is talking a little bit more about what the hand is doing through the stroke, and it's that you're making an S or a reverse S. So you're making an S with your left hand or a reverse S with your right hand. And so if we start at contact, the initial contact's made on the top of the hand ring, and the thumb is on the outer section of the hand ring with the first two fingers. So I talked earlier about the finger thumb style of glove, and I showed you how that was contacting the ring. This is the flat style. So you can see same idea in terms of whatever the hand position. We're not getting that outer part of the hand ring on contact with this style of glove because it's not a finger thumb, it's just a flat. So that's a different interface with the hand ring, but the hand is doing the same thing. So as we move through the drive phase, so you can see the pinky fingers beginning to rotate in, and it's rotating in all the way down to 6 o'clock. And here, I didn't mark this on here, but then you can see this angle that I was referencing. So here's he's at flexion at the elbow and an extension here at the wrist. So he's got a nice position from which he can apply force and translate that into power and forward movement. So now he's moving into this release part of the stroke. So then you can see here that thumb is driving down toward the ground. That pinky is rotating out here, and then finally we have where his palm's facing up toward the ceiling nearly, with that thumb rotated out. So this is it. So that's that reverse S of, and I tried to show that over here, is where you can kind of see this pattern here. So this is a reverse S with the right hand, and that's what you want to do. That it's really a dynamic movement of the wrist in order to optimize that contact with the hand ring. So which does I guess it's important to highlight too, is that there's extra stress on the wrist. So it is important then to not only obviously taking care of our shoulders and doing the appropriate preventative training in the gym to strengthen that system, but equally so we need to do that for the wrist, forearm system. And so we spend every strength session that the athletes undergo with our preventative strength training, we do spend time strengthening the forearm region, just in order to strengthen and have a nice stable system from which this very dynamic movement can take place. Here's a side shot of the same, where you can see how that thumb is pointed up toward the sky, as I talked about earlier, and then it's driving down toward the ceiling as we move through the contact angle. And then GD does a really good job of maximizing those last few hours of hand ring coverage, so you can see this really dynamic movement. We called it the 3 o'clock shift. I mean, it happens progressively later. Certainly with the glove style, it's almost a 5:30, 6 o'clock shift, where this hand's moving from where the thumb's flexed up toward the sky to where the thumb's being positioned and driven down toward the floor. And then he's off his release and ready to go into his separate and accelerate part of the stroke. Okay, we'll just go on this real quick. So one of the other points that I like to talk about is proximal to distal movement, and all that means is that we want to start creating energy from the center of the athlete's mass, and then it will translate through the arms, right, and then ultimately escape through the fingertips. And this is a very generalized explanation of what happens, because it's not that neat in reality, but on the macro level, it is. So we want to start our movement from the core, even when you don't have core. We're going to still start that movement from the center of the mass, and then when during contact, we have what's called a blocking, and then a subsequent transfer of momentum. And all the blocking is either your knees, right, and the back strap, but primarily the knees, or a chest plate if that's what's being used. And what that does is that takes that energy and transfers the momentum into the arms, right? So then it goes free, and then ultimately we want to release that velocity through the fingertips. And we want it to be a fairly linear movement in terms of that energy. So we don't want to backtrack where at the end of the stroke, let's say in picture 4, we want to start engaging the lats to release, which I often see that with novice athletes, is that they're in their attempt to move off the ring and release, they'll pull on the ring and try to pull up and back on it, which then typically they begin using the lats, and it actually is very counterproductive, and it applies a braking force to the ring. Rather, what we want them to do is release that velocity through the fingertips as they get off the hand ring. Okay, so I have a few videos. So let me do that real quick, and then I'll jump in on those Q&A. So I got 7, and I got 20 minutes, I think, or until they tell me to stop. Okay, so I got a few. So I want to look at, this is Aaron Gordian. He's a Mexican athlete, retired, but really very, very good, very successful. So what I wanted to show you guys was some of that transfer of momentum. So here's Aaron up at his peak lift and stretch here, and then he's popping that. So then see how he's moving that head and chest forward first, right? And then the hands are following suit there. And then he gets to about right here, and then we have this block right in here. Hopefully you can see my hand cursor here. But that's where that momentum that was just created in the center of his mass is now being translated and transferred into the arms. And then through his drive phase here. So we can see those angles here. See the elbows looking good here. We got wrist, and then it's kind of hard to see with this style. He's got a flat glove, so it's a little bit different, but we can see that wrist as an extension, and then he's driving forward. So same thing. There's the block, and there's that transfer momentum, and he's really releasing the velocity through his fingertips. So we'll watch. You can see that at full speed. So that's Aaron. So he was a pretty functional at full core. So he was pretty functional in terms of what type of muscle activation he could bring to the table. Here's Heinz, who I just showed you earlier in the photo. So Heinz is T53 and a fairly high T53 too. So you can see the difference. His knees are really high. But again, holds a world record in the marathon, which was set 20 years ago. Really, I mean, there's not much argument that he's the most successful wheelchair marathoner of all time. But if we watch his transfer momentum, again, look at that separation between his hand and his hand ring. And again, he's moving pretty quick right now. 23, 24 miles an hour, pretty doggone quick. And then there's his block right here. So you can see he's got a really nice stretch in here, and he's accelerating back to the ring. And then a block here, then that transfer momentum, and then that's being translated through his arm, through the ring, and driving off that back of the ring, really in a dynamic way. So here it is, nice separation, contact, transferring that momentum with a nice block, release, and you can see see how dynamic that is on release too. It's kind of fuzzy, I know. So that's a difference. So you have two variations in terms of seating position, but both are still effectively using this idea of blocking and then transferring that momentum from the center mass to the fingertips, so proximal to distal. And then let's look at this is Ray Martin, quadriplegic racer, has full core function. And so he really does a good job of utilizing that in the same way. And we can see he's got really great range of motion. So you can see, and he's spinning pretty well. This is a free spinning roller, but you can see, look at that separation. So a lot of room to accelerate back to the ring to set himself up for optimal force application. So here he is, he's going to go through, there's his block here. He's got a chest plate that he's on. And then he's moving and dropping all that velocity through the hand, through the fingertips, and throwing that ring in a really, really effective way. Really effective way. So this is at 54% speed. So you can see very smooth. Does a good job of translating that core function into force and then velocity. So so the last thing I wanted to do before I answer your questions was I want to do a case study on one of my athletes, Christian Clemens. So he's been here with me about 4 years, and we made it some different interventions, as I call them, in terms of some modifications and changes. And so Christian, when he started, he was running about a 55, 56 second 400s. That's typically that's the reference point that we use on the track to gauge performance and where the athletes are at in terms of training and competition preparedness. So within about 4 years, he's now running 46 second quarters, which, to put in context, is probably just off the back end of my athletes like Daniel Romachuk and Aaron Pike, who are running 44s, and Daniel probably just a touch faster than that on his good days. But let me load up. So here's Christian. This was when he first arrived at the program, and so this is at half speed. So in this setup, he had soft knee upholstery, so it wasn't fixed. Was on a harness glove, and so one of the opportunities that we had to make some gains, some of the low-hanging fruit, was this contact, and it wasn't yet optimal. So if we look through, and what I was looking at was, let's say he's coming through contact. Generally, we weren't getting. So if you can see, this is about 3 o'clock, and you can see here, as I talked about before, so you see how his pinky is still, it hasn't rotated in toward the wheel, so it's still positioned at this angle away from the wheel. So I knew that was an opportunity. So he really wasn't at that point, he was really just pulling down on the ring with his thumb. And so he wasn't getting good adhesion with the ring, and he wasn't getting in a good position where he could really drive and apply force. So so that was one area that we knew we could make some gains. All we need to do is reposition that hand so that he can drive through it and apply force a little more effectively. The second thing that was an opportunity was the release, and I talked about that a minute ago, was what he was trying to do was pull up on the ring. So you can see that right here is, as he's coming off the ring, he's rolling off with that thumb and just trying to pull up on those last few hours. And the issue with that is that it was only applying a braking force to the ring. It wasn't accelerating it in any way. And the other point too is that in order to do that, in order to do that pulling, he was moving back into his lats, which I just liken that to you're almost swimming upriver. And we want to stay, as I said, we want to follow the kinetic chain, and we want to be linear and as best we can. And when you're coming back into the ring and pulling up on it, you're really not. You're moving the wrong direction. You're moving the wrong direction. So so this was Christian a few years back, about 4 years ago, and like I said, he's probably running 56, maybe 58s on the track. So, but we knew there was a lot of opportunities where we could make some gains and create some performance improvements. So, so this is Christian more recently. I think this was probably last winter. And so what changes did we make? Well, we got him in a different seating position with a fixed knee tray and also a fixed foot tray. So we really got him in there in a solid position. So there wasn't any inefficiencies and loss of transfer of force during propulsion. The second change is that I had him do some I call it oversized hand ring training. So I had him pushing up on 16-inch plus hand rings. And that was just to get him into develop that sense of awareness of where the hand ring was at. And it forced him at every point of contact to move further out on the circle. And what that then allowed him to do was increase his range of motion and also, again, just an understanding of how to more effectively move the hand in a curved fashion to match the shape of the hand ring. So those two, but the biggest change that we made was to change his glove style. So he went from a soft harness glove into a solid finger thumb style, one that was brought to us by GD. Kim actually was adopted from the South Korean tradition of glove style, and very effective, very effective. And so what that has allowed him to do is to better apply force. Let me get it up here. Let me get this up a little bit. Christian's going to look back at me here in a second. I don't think he knew I was taping him, but so you can see here he's making good contact. And what I really want you to look at is what the pinky's doing. So you remember in the other video, and it was a little different vantage point, but the pinky was positioned out here. But now we can see he's starting to get that pinky rotation in. He's got really nice angles here, so you can see that's nice elbow flexion, wrist extension, really, really solid, really powerful. And then finally, the back end of the stroke is really, really dynamic and really effective. So you can see that thumb here is driving down and then rotating away, and he's moving that hand right in the position that we want to see, So it's such a dramatic difference of prior to he was pulling up on that ring, and now you can really see that he's milking that out and really driving in and applying some good force, really good force. So so that's really this, it's been the difference to run now into, there he is looking at me, running into 46-second quarters and really doing quite well on the road to So let's watch a few here and see what he's doing. So you can see some really nice angles and really nice force application. So, okay. All right, so let me jump in. I'll pull up these Q&As here, and let me jump through those. So I only got about 10 minutes. Okay, so Paul says, why the emphasis on reaching the back bottom of the ring compared with initial contact of the ring? So, so that was on my positioning part. So the reason is I can more easily get positioned in on contact, but what I want to do is I want to work back from that point from which, let's see, how should I say this? So when I'm videoing, I really just take one angle and I know the reference point, and then I know that if an athlete achieves that power position that I showed you, that with the wrist and the elbow, I know that if they get in that position, everything preceding that and everything following that is probably pretty good, right? So if you know that that's your optimal point, then we're pretty confident that they may not be doing everything else perfectly, but we're in the ballpark, right? We're in the ballpark. As compared to if you work back from just initial contact, there's a lot of things that can follow that go wrong and aren't efficient and effective. So it's always good to know and have a sense of one point in that stroke that you know is indicates that the remainder of and everything preceded it was fairly spot on. So that's why we use that. That's why. And it also gives the sense that they're making optimal that they're able to access the last few hours of the ring. And that's where you're going to find your velocity. Okay. Then an anonymous attendee says, is there an optimal amount of bend to have at the elbow at the bottom of the ring? Can it be two bend? Yeah. If you don't, that's where you go back to that hand ring diameter measurement and work from that. Yeah. So if you put an athlete like Daniel or Aaron, who was training with us this morning, who's got long arms, and he's on a 15 3/4 inch hand ring. Yeah, if you put him on a 14-inch hand ring, yeah, his stroke frequency is going to be really high, and he's not going to be applying force too effectively. So you want a little, sure. So you want some bend at the elbow at the end of the stroke. You certainly don't want to have it hyperextended. But generally, if you work off of that elbow to knuckle measurement, and then just try to look and just get some bend at the bottom of the ring, then you're probably in the right zone. You're probably in the right zone. How do we calculate hand ring diameter? I gave you that. So that's that hand elbow, and then work from there. Okay, any research contacting with straight wrist and between 2 and 3 o'clocks so the hand moves straight down rather than an angled wrist? I don't have any research, but I can tell you that the reason that we teach loading that hand ring in the hand is that because I think what that allows you to do is then how can I articulate this? You want a little bit of pushback when you make contact with the ring to load it, and then you have a subsequent acceleration of the hand ring. Otherwise, that's why you don't necessarily want to sit too far out in front of the wheel. So if you're pushing, and there's a sense of when you're pushing, if you sit further out in front of the ring, it feels really easy to push the hand ring, but you're just not. Your performance is going to be lower than sitting just a little bit deeper in terms of having that shoulder position a little bit deeper in the hand ring. So, so I don't. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have any research. This is just anecdotal and based on experience and observation, and both personally as an athlete and then just watching them and being around the sport for a number of years. I think that if you're at a high velocity, let's say you're pushing up at 24 plus miles an hour, I'm just thinking of the top guys, you're going to get less of that thumb toward the sky. So it is going to be a little bit straighter on contact. maybe not, depending on the athlete. But I would always suggest thinking about getting that hand ring loaded up in the glove. Okay, 2 things. Will the slides be available later? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I guess I'll put them on. I'll talk to our tech director, Matt Bushy, who's also the basketball coach, and we'll figure out how to get the slides. Yeah, I mean, this is all for you guys. What resources are there for amateur runners to get coaching? Well, that's a great question. U.S. Paralympics has some educational materials. USA Track and Field, I don't know if they do anymore. They used to have for level 1 coaching certification. I think there was also a Paralympic edition. I don't know if that still is offered, to be honest with you. And then I'm certainly I will share really anything and everything that I have. I have a Google Drive folder where I just dump things, and I'll share that freely with anyone. So I think that we're all a little bit better when we share information. So I'll do that. And I'll talk to Matt on how we can get those resources out to you. Is there any app to review this application with the athlete? I think in terms of video analysis, I use Canovia. I don't know if that's how you say it, but it's a free video editing app. You can use it on your computer. So, and it's pretty good. It's pretty robust. It's pretty powerful, and I'm pretty happy with it. And it's just open. It's free app. You don't have to pay for it. Carbonation water, good or bad? Bad for the lungs. I don't think it's bad. I don't know. We can ask Susanna when she's on Wednesday, and she can talk about the nutrition. I generally defer to people who know more about it than me, and so I don't know if it is. I don't think so, but that'll be a good question to ask her. This question is about this session. Oh yeah, I can help about the roller. Where's a great place to order hand rings? How small do they make them? Well, you can really order them. You can order them from any of the manufacturers. So you can order them from Barry Ewing at Eagle Sports Chairs. You can order them from Top End. You can order them from Chris Peterson at Carbon Bike. Also makes them. He'll be on tomorrow to talk a little bit more. So there's a few different places you can order them. How small do they make them? I don't know. I've seen them pretty small. So I think that you can probably make them fairly small. But you could ask Chris tomorrow when he's on. Okay, is there more? There's chat. Where are those at?
I think you've got pretty much everything covered. This is Coach Bushy just talking to you guys. Just want to let you all know that all the sessions we have here for track camp and basketball camp will be available next week. So when the camp is actually complete, all those videos are being recorded and they'll be available via YouTube. And they'll all be closed captioned and everything else, so we can cover it that way. Any material, so if there's any slides or videos or anything that Coach Adam wants to share, those will be shared on our camp website. So that is
disability.illinois.edu/camps. All right, everybody got that. All right, well, it's 11:58 on my clock, so if anybody has any more questions? I think that's it. All right, well, I'll wrap it up and really appreciate everybody who tuned in. And yeah, thanks for everybody who woke up or went to bed late to hang out and chat. So we'll keep on the rest of the week and hopefully continue to have some good sessions. If you guys have any follow-up questions, you can shoot me an email too, always. It's my last name, BLEAKNEY @illinois.edu. And then I'll do my best to get back with you. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk more tomorrow with strength workout. All right, any more? Thanks, Coach. All right, great.